Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie and I'm here with my husband Jim. First of all, we are sitting in a new podcast studio that hopefully we're slowly but surely turning it into a YouTube type studio, but we are sitting in a podcast studio. I have added in some soundproofing, so if you're listening and there's a
Sound muffling would be
muffling,
better. That's what the carpet's for. We got
yes,
hardwood floors. We got 10-foot ceilings.
or higher.
And so the echo is pretty bad. So we're hoping that this is going to give us better sound or it doesn't
We
echo
will see
around
what
the-
happens.
We shall
So
see what happens.
hopefully, comment or let me know. I know that we have one listener that I actually see quite often. So if this is not sounding good, I would love to know because, we listen to it, but I don't spend a lot of time editing. We don't edit
We don't
what
spend a
we
lot of time editing
say.
it. We don't. We just say it.
We just want to say it. We just want to get it out there. Just talk about
Yeah.
AI.
We
It's
also
time
have
for
a-
Jim to do a brain dump Sunday
Yeah,
evenings.
Sunday evening.
So
So
what do we have to talk about today?
we're not going to do a lot of headlines this time like we normally do, but I'm going to throw in a couple because I was talking to my daughter, Rachel's here, and I was talking to her about our podcast, and she thought that we had been a little too serious, a little too dark lately, deep fakes and all the other stuff. And I agree with her. And my passion has always been science and technology. So my first one is from AI Business, which is that NASA appointed their agency's first AI officer. I don't exactly know all of what they're going to do, but I've got some pretty good ideas. Right now, they're just trying to figure out how AI and large language models are going to fit in and all that stuff. They've got some interesting work to do, though. I mean, have you seen the Space Odyssey, movies?
Well, I think it's really interesting because think of all the data that NASA has.
That's a good point because when you think about all the data they have, somebody said once years ago that they lost
Plans.
the ability for the plans for the Saturn V rocket because it was on reel-to-reel tape.
Right.
And so if you can take and train an AI model with all of that, then maybe the technology that it's on becomes less important because it's now neural nets that have been trained to understand it. So
We lived in
anyway.
Florida for a long time, or for 5 years, I guess we were in Florida,
We did, and
close to NASA. We would go visit it quite often. We could see the space shuttles and stuff
You
take
could-
off.
you could sit in our backyard and watch the launches. And we went to a night launch,
Yeah,
and we
it's
took
really cool.
our kids got to go to lots of launches.
A lot more stuff. One of the things when we moved back to Texas that I noticed immediately is that you didn't hear the news about all the stuff going on because you weren't in the neighborhood.
Right.
And so this is, to me, anything to do with AI and NASA and all the data. I think it's a good thing.
But it's also something it's hard for us not to keep up with, even though we haven't lived in Florida in a long time.
Oh, now
We
we're a
still
little
got
hooked.
such a habit because
Mhm.
our kids were younger and they were so excited when the launches happened. It was cool.
Yes.
So the next thing I thought was interesting, again, it's a science thing. I think this is a great application of AI. They're talking about using cameras and AI specifically for wildfire threats and detection. Now, I'm not saying we need to put the guys that sit up in those towers out of business because I think it's important, but they have a lot to watch.
Yes.
And having an AI companion, it's probably lonely up there. They can talk to the
Okay,
AI
so my first cousin
too.
manned a wildfire tower up in Utah, Washington State, Wyoming. I
Somewhere
think
with a lot of
Wyoming.
big national forest.
Big national forest. He was up there, and yeah, I'm sure. I mean, because he was the only person.
You
that
can
was
chat with your
there.
AI, and your AI could help you look for smoke signals. Maybe you could see it if the cameras are good enough. Plus, you could loop in satellite and all that other stuff in there and kind of process data, and then you could go check it out.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
I
thought
think
that
it's a
was
good
interesting.
idea. Anything to help with stuff like that. I think we
So-
need more eyes.
The next one that I was going to talk about was in the USA Today,
Hmm.
which the other ones were the Washington Post, I think, and the NASA one was AI Business, but this one's USA Today. It was an article, I just read this today actually, about tutoring and teaching some students, reshaping the classroom landscape. And when you and I were talking about this, you brought up an interesting point, which I thought was worth a discussion,
Yeah,
which was the fact that Austin, there was a
there's
school
a
getting
private
slammed
school.
for that.
There's a private school in Austin that there was a actual newscast on it. At one of the news stations did a story on it about how they were using an AI for teaching students, and they were saying it was about 2 hours a day that the student was being taught by
They
AI.
were being tutored. I think was more accurate
They
than
were
taught,
being
right?
taught. The teacher was not
Okay.
present.
Okay, that's a little weird.
It's very weird, and it was on LinkedIn, and the video's been on LinkedIn, and of course I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and I follow a lot of different people who are like AI policymakers and stuff like that, and there was a lot of blowback from it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I actually commented on it because they were like all up in arms about it, and you shouldn't let AI replace the teacher. In public education in the state of Texas, our funding right now is such, and I go to meetings and read articles about Texas funding all the time. Our funding is such that we are not going to be able to replace teachers when they leave the profession because our budgets are getting cut so much.
And what was your experience? Remember the classroom that you were in at Chudrai, and we designed the whole class because it's for gifted and talented.
Yes.
We designed the whole class to have 16 kids maximum. How many did you end up with?
I ended up with 30 in one period one time.
And one of the reasons why is we couldn't afford to hire enough teachers to have enough electives. So the ones that, and you were an elective, and so the students didn't have anywhere to put them.
Well, the students that I had, I mean, the diversity in the class was so great, from, the kid with the ankle monitor to the kid that was an angel, and so I had to really.
And you had special needs and non-special needs, yes, and all the different things that you had to deal with. And meanwhile, you're trying to teach them how to use laser cutters and all that other
3D
stuff.
printers and really expensive equipment. But my point that I made is that as a teacher in a classroom, I would rather have an AI assistant in my classroom than have a class of 30 kids, because it's impossible.
You can't do anything. It becomes a babysitting service at 30 kids.
Something that there was a superintendent that we used to have here at Atlanta ISD. He and I had a long conversation one time because of budget. And he said, one of these days, they're going to have to cut teaching positions. And I was like, well, I hope that never happens to me. And he goes, oh, but you do. You hope you're one of the ones that's cut. Otherwise, you're going to have a class of 65 kids in your high school. And I was like, wow, you never really think about it. So do I think AI should teach the whole class? No. Do I think AI should be able to take a small group of kids and do tutoring and have, adult supervision? Absolutely.
Well, I don't think you have a choice when you have a governor who hates public education, and you have people that are determined to privatize education. I know you always give me a funny look when I say that, but the reality is that you're doing a huge I'm not saying public education is perfect. It's not. But privatizing it, when you have, we saw this when we lived in Florida. They were paying they were paying some of these superintendents of these private schools $800,000 a year. These guys made a huge amount of money. There was no accountability. They don't have anywhere near the accountability that public schools have. Mm-hmm. If you want public schools to save money, then let them kick out anybody they want to. Let them have more accountability. Get rid of all these requirements that you put on them. But if you're going to put the requirements, then you have to fund it. Mm-hmm. And they're not funding it.
No.
So is AI, what I'm afraid of is that AI is going to be seen by these same group of people as a way of getting rid of teachers.
Yes.
Because we don't want too many teachers, because then they might vote for, actual funding for schools and vote people out of office who hate public education.
The private school that was doing this, I saw their annual tuition for the private school was $40,000 a year.
And if you hand out student loans for a living, which some of these billionaires that are funding all this private school push probably do, I know some of them do. The Betsy DeVos, I heard her and her husband used to do that. Well, guess what? Now you can try to force these parents. They're going to get a whole $9,000 a year
and a voucher
from the state of Texas. Well, are they going to want to send their kids to a $9,000 a year private school? Probably not. They're going to send them to the $40,000 one, which means they're going to take out student loans not just for college anymore. It's also going to be for high school. And when you get to a time where I read an article today about blue collar becoming more in vogue because kids are deciding that they can't afford to go to college, I think that's great. I come from a blue collar family. I understand that blue collar, you and I have talked a lot about it because we know electricians and plumbers and how much we pay them. Mm-hmm. And we have to do some of the work ourselves. So just as that becomes in vogue, so you think, okay, now they're not going to have as many student loans. Well, yeah, actually they are,
Because now they're going to do high
because now
school.
they're going to have high school student loans.
Yeah.
Because these parents are going to give up whatever they have to in order for these kids to go to school, and they're going to get themselves in debt.
Yes.
Anyway, so the other part of this that you were talking about that was interesting was that 7%.
Yes. So I saw something else about there's a new study that has come out that says that only 7% of K 12 educators, it might have actually been 7% of all educators, are using artificial intelligence. I think that number is skewed because anytime I do a Bing search or if I go to do a Google search, what I am using AI now.
I think that what you said that was accurate was it's not about whether they're using it. It's about
Their intention. Are
whether or
they
not they're using it with
intentionally
intention.
using it? So the 7% is too low. The artificial intelligence is here. We all agree on that. There's way too much money in it and behind it. It's not going away. So we have to educate the students in K-12 education and in higher ed to be prepared to use it in their jobs.
Well, there was a discussion about Google and how Google's completely changing search, which we've seen. I've been a part of that Google search, the AI Google search thing for quite. It's been in beta forever. So
Right,
I've been a part of
it
it for a long time.
generates.
And you've seen that when you're using my login on the browser, on the Chrome browser, yours does it now too. But
Mhm.
mine did it originally, months and months ago, where it would pop up.
Generating.
It would generate an answer to the question, and then it would show me the links. And I told you even back then, I thought that was a good idea. So now that's everywhere. Now
Mhm.
it's in Bing search, it's in Google search. Google's going to make it a standard part of the platform. I think that that's not going away anytime soon. So I agree with you. I think, to put a plug in for what we do, we try to teach people how to use it with intention.
Yes.
Because it's misleading to say that, because unless they're the people who did that were trying, I don't know if they were trying to make people look bad because they're saying they're not using it enough. I don't know if they were trying to make a point. But I think the biggest point that needs to be made is using it. It's like any tool. The more you know how to use it, that's why we talk about professional development versus training. We partner with a company that we talk about professional development. She used to give me a hard time about the fact that I called it training for a long time. It really is different.
It is.
And the reason I think it's important distinction for teachers is because they need to be trained on not just what it is or the basics of using it, but when to use it and why to use it and what its tools are. Anyway, that's
Speaking of
leads
tools,
us to our next headline.
introducing GPT 4.0.
Okay.
Not 0.
It's a little O.
It's a
Stands
little
for
O.
Omni, I think.
So they are more tools, GPT for free users.
I think that's the big headline.
The big headline is that they're saying that they're putting a bunch of the stuff into the free version.
They're saying they put 4.0 into the free version. That's a
Have
big
you
deal.
seen that yet?
No, I have not seen it yet. I did get excited, as you well know, because
Jim?
they came out with.
Jim, excited about AI?
I got a little carried away again, as I always do, but they came out with a new app specifically for macOS. I used Linux, I use Windows, and I use Mac. And I've used the Mac quite a bit in the past 18 months or so. I've used it a lot because I could run models locally, large language models locally on the Mac because it had a built-in um, graphics processor. And the battery life was insane, and I can go on and on and on. I'm not a Mac fan person, but I did start out as a design engineer working on the early Macs and designing memory upgrades. And so
We worked for a Macintosh company
did.
back in the day.
I did. And so some of my first designs that I did were around the Mac. But this particular tool, what's interesting about it is they added features in that you do not have if you run the browser on Windows. And people are making comments about how a lot of their demos that they did at their announcement of this was on a Mac or was on an iPhone or was on an iPad. And I think part of that is the competition because Microsoft, yes, they own part of it, but I think GPT or OpenAI rather has to find a way to differentiate themselves from Microsoft or they're just going to get swallowed by them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the features in this thing, the one I love the most, when I was telling you and I was telling Amy about it, I was getting all excited. When I'm using it, I can do a couple of things. First of all, I can say take a picture, and it will take a picture through the camera on the Mac. The second thing I liked was, which is the biggest one I liked, was that I can actually have it do a screen capture and discuss what's on the screen, and it gives me a list of what's open. Like in my case, I had a PDF file open showing all my network switches and IP addresses and all that stuff that because I've been working on some stuff.
It's really cool.
And the fact that I could tell it, I could select it and say, let's have a discussion about this using the 4.0 model. And it could tell me the names of switches and locations. It could tell me IP addresses. It could tell me whatever I needed to know. And this was like a 2-second thing.
So what I am wanting to do is redact student information, take test scores, PDF, put it in there, and then see what kind of analysis it can give me about scores.
And yes,
because
we're going to redact, we're going to anonymize it and redact any information that has anything to do with point it to a specific student.
Correct. I spent so much time looking at state results of high stakes testing when I was an AP that it's monotonous.
Well, the thing about it is, and this is where the power comes in. You and I talk about this. Your boss when you were assistant principal, the lady who was the principal, she very much loved data stuff.
Oh.
And you did a lot of data stuff for her. And
definitely data driven.
The problem with it is that you'd spend so much time, and all you have to do is ask one question that you didn't account for, and you got to go back and redo stuff. Mm-hmm. The idea of using these AIs to play with data, to be able to go ask it questions in a natural language way, and have it reshape things, because once you ask it a question, it can graph it for you. Like what I did is I said, extract this information from this PDF that I want, and I gave it a list, and I said, create a table. Column 1's this, column 2's that, and it created a table, and I asked it to create a link so I could download it.
Wow.
So I took a screenshot, I talked about the data, I extracted it, put it in a table, and gave myself a link to download the file in 3 minutes.
So the video that I watched, that was the demonstration of GPT 4.0, there was 2 things that really caught my attention. One of them was the emotion.
Yeah, that's the one I haven't gotten a hold of yet.
It's kind of cool because it was like, I want you to say it with enthusiasm. I want you to do it with more enthusiasm. I want you to do it with even more enthusiasm.
I want you to have a robot voice.
I want you to have a robot voice. I want you to have, so it's like when you're dealing with kids, you gotta have ways to capture and keep their intention.
Especially kids nowadays,
their engagement
when they're born.
Yes.
Before they leave the hospital.
As soon as their little hands will work, they got an iPhone in there. So it's like that ability to switch it up every single day. The other thing that really, I was like, wow, mind blown. It was able to speak in a different language every time it heard the opposite language. Now, what I mean is, if cool. I am sitting here with someone who speaks Spanish, I ran into this the other day. We were getting some sidewalks put in at your mom and dad's house because of wheelchair accessibility.
Yes.
And the guys that were out there working in the heat of the day, getting this stuff done, they didn't speak English. And I was trying to communicate with them, and they're so nice.
They were trying.
He would sit there and he would, they're not understanding, but they're still saying yes, yes. And I know they're not understanding. And so finally I held my phone up and I said, "Is this okay?" And he was like, "Yes." And so I used Translate on ChatGPT, just the app on my phone, and it translated back and forth. But I had to say this in Spanish, say this in Spanish. With 4.0, I can tell it, every time you hear me say something in English, please say it back in Spanish. And every time you hear somebody say something in Spanish, please say it back in English.
Well, technically, you could have done that with your app. However, the problem with your app is when using 4.0 is that it wasn't fast enough. One of the things they did with 4.0 is they made it better because it could handle the faster speed.
Right. So 3.5 is really fast.
3.5 is fast, but it can't translate well.
But it can't do it.
4.0, which is 4.0, the regular 4, could do it, but it was very slow. 4.0, the new one, I really don't like their name. The new one, 4 Omni, is able to do it in a natural way, which is what you were really talking about,
That's
was the
why.
fact that it was a natural flow. You should have had my little rabbit with you, little handheld rabbit
Well,
that I got.
I don't even want to talk about that.
Oh, that thing
The-
works great for translation. I did it the other
It's
day.
a several $100 translation device.
It's fun to play with.
Well, I'm glad that you're enjoying it because I just think it's. Yeah.
You thought
I
it was
personally think it's a waste of money, and it took way too long to get here.
The
But
good news is I ordered it when you were out of town,
yes, I know.
so
But
you couldn't give me it's a waste of money.
the thing about the translation that I like the most is that every time I would say something and have it translated into Spanish, I was asking him a question and I needed to know what his answer is. But since I don't understand Spanish, he couldn't answer me.
That's true.
So it was the back and
The
forth.
fact that when you hear Spanish, I want you to tell me in English. When you hear English, I want you to say it in Spanish. That's
Game
the
changer.
key. The game changer with the speed. That when you add these features all together, and we have said from day one, since all this started, that you need to be careful putting all your eggs in some of these people's basket that are just taking and putting a wrapper around these tools. Now, for those people doing wrappers, the other thing about this one's not only is it faster and it's got more capabilities, but it's also a lot cheaper. I did a thing where I was doing some testing with the old regular 4.0 not long ago, and in a 30-minute conversation I was having with it, where I was using an agent-based thing that I built, I spent $12.
It cut me off the other day. I was working on some presentation proposals for the TCEA in 2025, and I was going back and forth, and it finally said that I needed to wait a couple of hours. I was like, man, you're so rude.
It'll still do that.
That's just rude.
You could have switched to Claude.
I could.
But the other announcement, there's so many things in this 4.0.
Hold on. I got one more thing I got to say before we move on to the next headline. So one of the things that really bothered me when I was in the classroom is that I would have a group of kids that were Spanish speaking that would be talking in Spanish. And I'm sorry, I understand that is your native language. I understand that you're talking to your friend in Spanish.
They weren't doing it just because they were comfortable.
They were doing it because they were talking probably crap about the teacher,
or they were just having a conversation that was unrelated to class.
Absolutely. And to me, it's rude.
It used to be considered rude. I don't know if it is now, but it used to be considered rude.
As a teacher, you have to be careful. You can't tell them you cannot speak in their native language. They have to be able to say that. But if I had this device to where every time it heard Spanish, it told me what it was saying in English, I would know if they were cheating. I would know if they were, talking about whatever it is they're going to do after school today they probably shouldn't be doing, or, whatever. So it gives the teacher a little more transparency in the classroom.
Well,
think about being in a classroom that has 5 or 6 different languages. The larger schools.
Yes.
How cool is that?
This opens up some other opportunities for the teachers' pain points. They always talk about translation being one of their big pain points.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's dangerous for the people that just build a wrapper around it is, once again, big company comes in, they suck in some of those features. I'm not saying those things don't add value. These companies that do this stuff and they tune these things for their particular target audience, I think that's a great thing because it makes it easier. The problem is it's hard for them to make money doing it, because a company can come in like this and add these new features in like they're talking about, and suddenly your product is irrelevant.
Obsolete.
Even if your product is better, is it enough better for people to pay you for it?
Right.
Or would they just rather pay these big companies? That's what I'm afraid of, which leads us to our
last headline,
which is Google. Mm-hmm. The OpenAI did this announcement of the 4.0 thing on purpose, I'm sure, right before Google's big conference.
Oh,
I.O. 2024. They were trying to upstage them. They did a pretty good job of doing it. Google had 100 things on this article we're reading here, which is actually on Google's website, blog.google. 100 things we announced at I.O. 2024. I'm not even going to go into most of them. I can tell you that of the 100 things, AI was probably in most of them in some way.
90%.
Google did a lot of stuff, and some of the stuff was cool. The problem Google has is they're the company that them and Microsoft are the company I'm concerned about what we call making everything vanilla.
Mm-hmm.
What they really announced, what it boils down to, is we're integrating it into all of our workspace stuff,
mm-hmm.
our office work. We're Google Sheets, Google Docs. They've been doing that for a while.
Right.
They added some new features in that you can use if you're using Gemini, but it's hard to figure out whether it's in the paid version of Gemini or the free version of Gemini. The old saying used to be, a confused consumer never buys. When I look at Google's stuff, I tend to be confused because, for example, I get access. I've had early access to a lot of this stuff on my personal account, my Gmail
Right,
account.
right.
But if I go to school, which I've tried multiple times, okay, can I get it through my Google educational account? Well,
Not
the answer is
necessarily.
no, I
Yep.
probably can't. Well, or they want to charge me, it's back to the money thing again. They want to charge me per month per student, and I can't afford it. That's what, when you look at the fact that they're talking about putting these features, even though they're going to cut them off sooner because they're not going to let you ask as many questions before they cut you off,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they're putting this into the free version, these kind of features, is hopeful for me. You and I talk about this all the time.
Yes.
If you want us to be able to educate kids on your technology, you have to make it where we can afford it in school districts.
TechCrunch, speaking
Yes.
of Google, at its annual Google I/O 2024,
That's what
which
this
is what we're talking about,
Yes.
Google announced AI-generated quizzes where a new conversational AI tool on YouTube will allow users to figuratively raise their hand when watching educational videos. Viewers can ask clarifying questions, get helpful explanations, or take a quiz on the subject matter.
Well, and they're talking about using it. Oh, yeah, the other feature, by the way, that ChatGPT talked about, they're going to allow you to pull in information from your Google Drive or your Microsoft OneDrive
Mm-hmm.
into your chat without having to go copy paste from it, which is a big deal.
That's a big deal.
But Google being able, I've seen a lot of stuff where Google, again, they're integrating it into their tools. I don't know what's available to me. Google is in this nonstop beta thing that they do where they don't release something.
Right.
And so I can't ever figure out. I usually have Ron, one of the guys that works for me at the school, I'll have Ron go, okay, Ron, go and check to see if this is actually available.
Because it says here, these new features are rolling out to select Android users in the US.
I know. And so it's going to be available on my phone
Yeah.
only, or is it going to be on these Android whiteboards that everybody's selling?
Yeah.
And if so, how do I get access to it? And how much money is it going to cost? And
with these new features, you can ask the AI to summarize the video or tell you why it's important. Well, there's been a extension.
I've used that extension.
A YouTube summary for a year.
I've been using that thing for months.
So I don't know.
Their features all sound good, but they're rolling out too many things. It's too generic. People don't know how to use it. We had a teacher the other day who asked if she could. She said there was a teacher at another school that was using AI specifically for taking stuff from forms, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or generating quizzes or something from forms.
Yes.
But I don't remember what it was.
It was an extension she wanted to add.
The other thing that I have to tell people, which is one of the things that worries me when Google has all these announcements, is there is a lot of people out there. You can go find. I can go look for ChatGPT.
Oh, it doesn't even pull up OpenAI.
It's not even OpenAI.
Right.
It's people that have copied their logo, where it's almost the same, but not quite. Well, I told this teacher, I said, your IT department, probably at your other teacher school, and what I'm going to do, give me the name of it. I'm going to go look at it to see if the company that put it up there looks legit. Because don't forget, folks, when you add an extension in, the people that put that extension in get to decide whether or not they can see everything you type.
You have to say allow for it to access your Google information and all that stuff.
So you got to make sure the company's legit, just like you would before you download an app on your phone and all that other stuff. Don't get so carried away that you forget to at least check to make sure they're legit before you start using it. And at the school, we have to be really careful about that. Mm-hmm. And then we have to, again, that professional development, we have to teach teachers how to make sure they're not violating FERPA and COPPA and all the various rules too.
Yes. Okay, so we only have about a minute left. So I'm going to ask you, did we stay positive this time?
I think so.
I think so too.
I think we did better. We didn't talk about the negative aspects of it. I'm excited about the science, the medical, the educational capabilities. I'm excited about all of that stuff.
Next time, let's talk about the home.
The home one, I had I could have spent 15 minutes on that home thing. That was so cool, but we're out of time.
We will make sure we talk about that next time.
Just turned red.
So this is Maurie. I'm here with my husband, Jim. We are AI in Action and AI education professionals, and we hope that you have a marvelous rest of the week.